Hey guys, welcome to Peace of Truth. It's Monday, August 3rd, 2015, 11:57 p.m. as I'm recording this. I just wanted to go over this article real quick because it is on the UN's new agenda for the next 15 years. According to MSN.com, here it says the UN states set goal to end poverty, hunger in the next 15 years. It says here the United Nations, 193 member states of the United Nations have reached agreement on a new development agenda for the next 15 years that calls for eradicating poverty and hunger, achieving gender equality, improving living standards, and taking urgent action to combat climate change. The draft agreement reached Sunday evening outlines 17 goals with 169 specific targets on issues ranging from ending poverty in all its forms everywhere to ensuring quality education and affordable and reliable energy and protecting the environment. We can be the first generation that ends global poverty and the last generation to prevent the worst impacts of global warming before it's too late, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon told reporters Monday. The document, called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, that's a pretty key little buzzword, will be adopted at a UN summit just before the annual meeting of world leaders at the General Assembly in late September. Ban said the goals represent a to-do list for the people and the planet. They address the requirements for all humanity to be able to live decent lives free from poverty, hunger, and inequality, he said. They commit all of us to be responsible global citizens, caring for the less fortunate as well as for our planet's ecosystems and climate action on which all life depends. The 17 new non-binding goals will succeed the 8 Millennial Development Goals adopted by the world leaders 15 years ago. Elaine Geyer-Aleli, who monitored the UN negotiations for WWF, the world's largest independent conservation organization, said the new plan is a significant improvement because it recognizes that protecting the environment, eradicating poverty, and promoting economic growth and well-being are interlinked. Mia Mohammed, the UN Special Advisor on the post-2015 agenda, said more than 8,000 people engaged in setting the new goals, including the first-time representatives from hundreds of organizations, business, parliaments, and youth in addition to government officials. In his final report last month on the Millennium Developmental Goals, Ban said the effort helped lift more than 1 billion people out of extreme poverty over the last 15 years, enabled more girls to go to school than ever before, and brought unprecedented results in fighting diseases such as HIV/AIDS. Despite significant progress on all the MDGs, the only original goal that was achieved ahead of time was cutting in half the number of people living in extreme poverty, and that was due primarily to economic growth in China. Ban stressed inequality remains with 80% of the people living on less than $1.25 a day located in southern Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, and 60% in just 5 countries, India, Nigeria, China, Bangladesh, and Congo. Agreement on the new goals is the culmination of more than 3 years of intense and complex negotiations. Sticking points in negotiations, which were supposed to be completed Friday, included differences over references to good governance, reproductive rights for women, and occupied territories. Pretty interesting stuff. And how to refer to climate change ahead of December summit in Paris, which will hopefully adopt a legally binding climate agreement to keep global warming from reaching dangerous levels. I hope you guys are reading between the lines on all this. I really don't think I need to tell you what this stuff really means. I think you guys, if you're already subscribed to this channel, you already know. 2 key issues are cost and implementation. Kenya's UN Ambassador Macharia Kamau, one of the facilitators of the negotiations, said implementing the goals will cost between $3.5 trillion and $5 trillion every year, which he insisted is not unattainable because most money will come from domestic resources raised in countries, complemented by the international development assistance, meaning, tax dollars from the U.S. There's no reason why he can't see remarkable transformation, he said. Ireland's UN Ambassador David Donoghue, the other facilitator, said that even though the goals are political, don't underestimate the impact of governments, which will be subject to peer pressure and regular monitoring on implementation. They do represent a new way of doing business, he said, is highly significant. So basically here, if you, well, thank you for putting up with my mispronunciations and terrible pronunciation. It's late here. It's now after midnight. But basically what this says is that in the next 15 years, the UN is really going to have things on lock. We're going to see the agendas coming even faster than we've seen them come the last 15 years. They're looking at the light at the end of the tunnel for their agenda. They're in a dead sprint to get there at this point, I believe, and it's pretty scary. I mean, between just a few of the quotes in here, for instance, the specific targets on issues from ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Now, obviously, that sounds great. I don't want anybody to live in filth and for their children to be hungry. That's not what I'm arguing for. What I'm saying is they suggest the perfect scenario without actually coming up with a way to come up with 3.5 to 5 trillion every year other than international development assistance. Because you have to remember that these poor countries that need most of the help, I mean, yes, they are getting raped by Western corporations, and they should be getting compensated more by the oil companies and by all the resource companies. But putting that aside, they don't really have much to contribute to raise for domestic, in their country. I know that's partially what the TPP is about, but what they're suggesting, ending poverty, is basically they're saying we're just going to have the U.S. taxpayers pay for it, which, we'll form your own opinion on that. And it says here that sticking points in the negotiations, which were supposed to be completed Friday, included differences over references to good governance, which is interesting in itself, reproductive rights for women, and occupied territories. Now, the way that I interpret the first half of this paragraph is basically they're still working on what they are going to be considering to be good governance, meaning what they can get away with. Reproductive rights for women, meaning what reproductive rights they're going to choose to give to women. And occupied territories, basically how they're going to slice up the globe so they can make the populations fight amongst each other so a little easier to control. That's my take on that. And then how to refer to climate change ahead of December. How to refer to climate change. So they're looking for another way to reframe the climate change argument so people start buying it. Anyway, I don't want this one to be much longer than it is. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link in the description box as always so you guys can read the article for yourself and share it with your friends. And as always, thank you very much for your time. Take care.